Man, this is something new, I have to say. Matt looked around his surroundings. He was in a cell. A cell? Where? Well, where is not the right way to say, but it's appropriate. Matt sat with his ankle chained. He was in a mine, as he could tell. He looked to his left. He saw a few ponies. He was very confused. Then he remembered. He was probably in the hospital, convulsing, choking on his vomit. Either that or this was the last of his, fever dream he was in. He remembered the name he had gotten, the name back on Earth. He was known as the state hacker. Sure, he'd gained many names at many different places. The Virginia Slasher, Texas Head Hacker, all kinds of stuff like that. Matt didn't want to make any names like that here. Many people saw him as a murderer, but he was actually a vigilante. He just goes insane. People mistake him for a serial killer. Sure, he's fucking evil. He knows this. But that's not his fault. Maybe it is. His sides of his vision begin to darken again. He takes a deep breath, looks to his right. More ponies. This isn't some weird fever dream. Too real. Matt knows the difference between reality and he knows the difference between insanity. This is real, whether or not he wishes to accept that. He doesn't accept denial, so he puts forth acceptance. I stare. I smile. Well, this is a change of scenery. I must say, the decor in here is rather dry and bland. He'd feel somebody nudge him or rudely ram something in his side. Ugh, fuck. You, monkey, get back to work. He'd just woken up. He may as well do as he's told. He raises the pick and slams it down on a random rock. He doesn't even know what he's doing. He just woke up. The guard, which appears to be a dog, walks away. He moves his eyes to his left and says, "What's happening?" The pony, which appears to be female with a feminine body structure, which appears to have a heart for a cutie mark, looks at him and says, "I don't know what or who you are for that matter, but I'm sorry that you're here. I'm sorry that it had to be like this. You got captured by the dogs. Eventually they'll let you go. They'll let us go. But we'll have to be here for a while." Matt caught on to things pretty fast. He knew mythological creatures and such. The woman, or mare he was talking to, was a unicorn. There were a few Pegasus and even a few regular looking ponies, which he later found out were earth ponies. He put one hand in his pocket. Pulled out smoke, put it in his mouth, lit it, and kept working. Well, look, I don't know what's going on here, but I'm not quite the fan of being bound or bound. They're the dogs. If it was me, he felt his dark side slowly coming, the corners of his vision slowly fading outward into a darkness. If it were me, I put a collar on them and a muzzle. I'd tie them down. I'd break their leg and beat them. He shook his head. The mare to his left looked awfully shocked, but for obvious reasons she didn't deny that she wouldn't care if he did so. He said, sorry. Matt wondered where his hatchet was. He looked around and saw it on a table not too far. And Matt was that kind of guy. He was paranoid. He raised his boot and stomped it. He could tell his knife was still strapped. He smiled. Those idiots. Those stupid, pathetic mutts. This would end quickly, and he knew it. Matt knew with every fiber of his being that these stupid mutts, they took him for a fool, and now they're going to pay the ultimate price. They're going to die down here. They're going to die, and their bodies are going to wither and decay into nothing. And Matt will move on with his life. This will be just another moment which he'll forget about. He'll happily forget. But right now, he has to deal with it. With these things. He has to put these mutts in their place. Matt knows something very well. If you can break anything. You can scare it. You can break it with pain, or you can break it with fear. There's more ways to break them, sure, but he'd rather break them with fear. He loves to see them crawl. Matt shakes his head. He doesn't like it when he gets in that mindset. That mindset where he's the hunter, the predator, and he's going for the prey, the victim. He'd never really killed anyone innocent. Everyone that has always done something, whether it be a sin or whether it be against the law. He'd always been the vigilante. He'd always killed the guilty. Matt looked to his left and stared at the ponies. They seemed like they were hungry. He could tell. Whether it's malnourishment or it's the other thing, he could tell they were starving. Not near death, no, but to make it miserable. He could tell what they were doing. He knew what these mutts were doing. They were starving them to get them to work harder, to motivate them. The good ones got food. The good ones got water. While the rest ate the scraps. He knew what they were trying to do. You obey, you don't disobey, you'll get your food. He knew this game. Why? Because it's common sense. You can keep people in line. All you have to do is make them roll over, and they'll get their dog toy. They'll get their treat. The only treat they'll get is their eyes gouged out and a knife in their throat. He'll make it painful. He'll make it very painful indeed. Bust their kneecap out. Maybe even ram... Hell, maybe he'll even ram a rail spike into their lung. Watch them hack and cough as blood fills their lung and they suffocate. Ram their head in a fucking bucket full of nails. He doesn't know. He's just getting started. Matt again shakes his head. He breathes slowly. His senses changing. Matt looks to his left and says, I'm gonna tell you a plan, but just wait. She doesn't seem like she's wanting to associate with Matt. After all, he does seem kind of crazy. He slams the pick down again. He moves his head slightly right so he can get a decent view on everything. There's 4 dogs at a table playing some kind of card game. But they're on the other side of the room, and the view is slightly obstructed. Actually, it's decently obstructed, to be honest. To his left, there's a dog who seems to be walking back and forth. To his right, there's a dog who every 5 minutes goes, takes a drink of something, and that drink lasts about 30 seconds, and then refills and continues for another 5 minutes, and repeats the process. Matt smiles to himself. These dogs are so stupid and gullible. He thinks of different ways. He could make a diversion, and then when one comes and kneels, he'll cripple them. He had a few options. Diversion. Sure, he could fake a diversion. Make up some bullshit. He was always good through lying through his teeth. He could tell these dogs weren't that smart. They were probably extremely gullible. He could fake an injury. He didn't mind goring himself. He could make up some bullshit. He looked above him. The ceiling did seem rather close. He could raise it up on accident, hit a rock, bashes him. He could, while raising it up, he could kind of lose his grip. The pickaxe could come down and gore him. There's a number of ways. He had a plan in set. The one that was patrolling, not the one that was doing that 5-minute drink thing or whatever. The one that was walking had keys. He smiled. It was just one key, a master key that could unlock all of the chains. When the dog walked over, actually he stopped. He looked to his left and realized that some of these ponies seemed to be sentimental. If no one knew what that meant they seemed like they were working for something. He could tell that they probably had families. He couldn't make his plan into effect. If he did, he's going to risk their lives. He's going to risk their lives out of selfishness. Another part of him is telling him to just fucking do it. Just fucking go with it. He had a foolproof plan set. He had a way to escape, and he also had thoughts to cripple morale. What he would do is, he'd fucking disembowel these dogs, load them in a cart, and send it down the way. When the dogs see him, they're either going to be stupid and gullible and walk down, or they're going to be smart and run away out of fear. He lowered his head thinking. Then he decided.